We're here to try to see how to generate a trust ecosystem, how to build a community that makes it possible for eventual clients to trust that this technology works, it delivers what we say it delivers, and it's not a simple challenge. We start by the observation that this community is growing very fast. In April of this year, the Berkeley event, 150 people. That was an amazing moment for this community. The talks, the quality of the talks there, you can go online on YouTube and listen to the different talks that were given. You had an overview of everything that's being built in Zero Knowledge Proof, presented by the people that created those schemes and those systems. I really recommend. So I'm not a cryptographer myself, but there's maybe 5 to 15% that you can still understand in the intro slides. So I really recommend that you go and see those videos. The space also has a lot of adoption in the cryptocurrency community, but what I'm going to talk here is how do we convince and make it possible for the enterprise world to adopt this technology. So the fast adopters in cryptocurrency, they move fast and they break things, but when we're talking, they try to make sure that they don't break them before they go to mainnet, right? But it's a place where sort of sandbox with built-in bounties to the technology, if you will. But in a way, if you want to believe in Zero Knowledge Proof as implemented by Zcash, you go buy a Zcash token. But what do you do if you're a company that wants to move their infrastructure to this new technology? How do you gain trust in that? How do you start putting the private data of your own clients on these systems and still give assurance that that data is not propagated everywhere, and still you can trust that the processes are happening correctly? These questions, the stake is very high. And I will start by giving an example from probably a very known area to walk through the problems of adoption. So this is the example of a collaborative KYC use case. So in this case, there's a platform that has lots of users, platform A. They have tons of users' data. And they want to give them some financial service that's offered by another provider, by B. Let's say that's a bank. Today, if B wants to give, let's say, a loan to this user, they need to onboard them to their systems, and they need a copy of that user data. And you can imagine that if a platform wants to have many different services offered to their users, that copy of user data is going to repeat itself with many different providers. And you stop having a control, the user stops having a control on what's happening with their data. But also commercially, this platform, that data is their clients, right? They don't want to send their clients everywhere. They don't want to lose the direct relationship that they have with the clients. So, but still, we need to solve KYC. We need to, the provider of the service needs to know that they're providing a service to a person that's allowed to get them. So what's happening today is that copy of the user data gets through a KYC process, and there's validation. Of course, in the background, there's always the regulator, looking around, maybe sampling that you're doing your process correctly, and giving the spirit of why you need to even check that data. Now, if we're talking about Zero Knowledge Proof adoption, the first thing that needs to happen is that companies that are in this use case, that are in this position, need to recognize that actually there's another way of approaching this problem that doesn't need sending copies of user data to the other party. So this is the proposed solution. So, of course, the first step is we want to be doing KYC on the user data. So we'll take that user data and run the KYC process, except we'll take the original data, not the copy of the data, and that process will be done in zero knowledge so that we can assure that all the steps of the process were correctly done. So we create a zero knowledge proof. And that proof is sent to that other party. That other party will verify that the proof is valid, and that's how they will be assured that this person is allowed to get the financial service. Now, the process that's running here is exactly equivalent to what you would have if B was seeing all the data. And this is important. For them, it needs to be a change that's not really a change. They're supposed to be able to say, from a result perspective, we've achieved the same result. But from A's perspective, they spared sending the data all over the place. Now, if we are to convince ourselves that such a use case is possible, okay, so the companies recognize that this is a preferable solution than what they have today, but they still have a series of entangled concerns that are now being spread out. So when I was sending my data to the other party, I was actually achieving more than just the KYC process. But now that things are in zero knowledge, those things need to be achieved again. So let's go through them. The first one, KYC process itself. I gain the trust by running that process on my machine, if I'm B. I need to have the same trust that even though this process is not running on my machine, the outcome is still completely valid. So this is, of course, what zero knowledge proof gives. But they got other concerns meshed into this problem. Data retention. You need to keep the data for 7 years if you're a financial institute. So how do you do that when you don't have the copy of the data with you? You could have commercial agreements with the other party that they will save the data for you when the regulator wants it. But still, this is a change of mindset from how people are used to do KYC. For them, it's obvious. This is all meshed together. Especially that third point, client retention, client relation. The original relationship with the client was with A. And now, under the need to have a KYC process, all of a sudden that client, the ownership of that client or of that relationship is diluted. B can now approach that client and start working commercial processes with this client directly without the platform, without A. So we had all those concerns meshed into moving the data from A to B. And now, in order to adopt this technology, you need to start thinking about those problems in separate categories. And that's not a simple thing. It's obvious once you point to the fact that it's not a necessity to send the data. But before that, people are very happy to be doing mining data that came through KYC angle. And it's actually fascinating listening to the conversations so this is a real life example. The conversations that start once the parties realize that they're now talking about the core stuff. Who owns the client? Who owns the data? What will I be able to do without seeing the data? Can you mediate me doing cross-sale? How do we share the profits from a cross-sale? All these points are core to business making, but they're enabled by the fact that you separated the data from the processing. So, okay, the companies are convinced that they should collaborate based on zero knowledge proof. But which zero knowledge proof, right? There's a proliferation of schemes and techniques in the past years, papers written. So I did just a random sampling from the papers that I remember the titles. there's more and more of publications coming out. How do you know what are the schemes that you need to use? And where do you even form this opinion? The people inside your organization are probably not cryptographers, and even the cryptographers, to form this opinion, they need this. They need ZKProof assembly and talking to the detail of each scheme and getting presented with the detail of the technology to be able to compare between the schemes. It's not a simple feat to understand what technology to choose when this is 30 years of research that are now available. By the way, the first zero-knowledge proof paper to be published was actually in February 1989. That's 30 years ago. So how can clients trust the tech if they don't really, it's not really feasible for them to understand the depth of the tech? That's the problems that, like Ruben mentioned, unite us here. So let's look at what's going on in ZKProof. We have a combination of the academics that are working on finding new ways, sometimes new mathematical objects that can serve as the basis for zero-knowledge proof. Sometimes they take, the work is to advance those discoveries to make them a little bit more practical. So change the constants so that they're not asymptotically okay, but actually useful for real purposes. And then you have taking those advancements and putting them in libraries that are useful for applied cryptographers and for protocol development in general. And then, only then, you get to integrators and clients having a peek of those implementation and saying, okay, how can I trust this implementation? So this flow between academia and actual engineering coming to the market, the place where we connect all these communities together and have the trust flow from one to another is ZKProof.org. And the way that we want to achieve this is by remembering that originally those claims are proven with mathematics. Originally, those papers spend a lot of time and actually take trade-offs on usability to prove their statements. So we have a seed that's true in the most peer-reviewed academic way that we can produce. So we need to keep that element of truth in the schemes as we move to make them better from the constants perspective and implement them, etc. Keep that element of truth so that at the end, the users or the clients can trust the technology. So basically, yeah, they're listening to us. This slide, we use it as we talk to clients. And let's say the Pareto law, 80% of their apprehension goes away when they understand that there's a process to vet what they're going to be using. Now it's up to us to actually make sure that that process is valid and strong. So once that fear of is the promise realized and can I trust the tech is gone, we're left with the challenge of explaining zero-knowledge proof among us and to external parties. And that challenge is not small either. When you look at just the jargon that's used in zero-knowledge, the mainstream understanding of those words is not what commonly is referred in our community. For example, a hash, usually when you hear about hashes in the context of privacy for a regulator, let's say, it's about anonymizing the data. It's replacing the username by a sort of by a hash that makes it supposedly impossible for you to realize who that person is. this anonymization function of a hash is usually not what we're looking for in our case. We're hiding all the information under hashes, and the hashes are commitments so that we can prove things on the data under the hash. So it's a different approach to using the same tool. The same goes with the word proof. Every time we use proof and don't qualify it as a zero-knowledge cryptographic proof, people associate proof with the data itself. If I don't see the fields of that person, how can I get an assurance that this person is KYC valid? So for us, a proof is what you need in order to verify the claim. And usually a proof is just the data itself. Or a third party signing to the data if you want to give credit to auditors in the room. And then even more complex, asset transfer. So usually a transfer is just a transaction. If we talk in the blockchain space, a transaction in the ledger. But when you talk in the world of zero knowledge, a transaction is all those proofs that show that the ownership was nullified and a new ownership was created and that asset existed. It's a set of statements about data that in the end should be equivalent to the asset changing hands without anybody doing any bad thing to it. So explaining those things, even here maybe it's not the best job, but it's a necessary job so that we can use those tools in practice and separate concerns and explain what the tech is doing. So I'd like to end with this. We're not alone pushing these explanations. The World Economic Forum recognized that privacy enhancing techniques are the way to have business collaborations happen while removing the concerns of the data changing hands. So privacy enhancement techniques are now on the rise and detected as their own sort of ecosystem. The other techniques you're probably familiar. There's homomorphic encryption. There's multi-party computation, differential privacy. So multi-party computation has this little thing, not the MPC for securing your private keys, the MPC for collaborating based on private data. It's different types of use for the same MPC. But in a way, this field is now being pushed forward to decision makers around the world so that they know that they have new tools to build business relationships. And yeah, and this is a point of pride. The reason why I put this slide. We were selected as technology pioneers for the World Economic Forum, and we're very proud of it. So this is also a place to say that companies like Deloitte that adopt this technology in their products. So one of those products is EduScript, which is a way to prove credentials about you when you went to study some courses. It's a form of identity management based on tokens, and we partnered with Deloitte on this project. When Deloitte is joining this effort, of course, it changes the angle to the technology. It now becomes one of those things that are pretty innovative, but are part of what is feasible, what is useful for clients worldwide. So maybe to conclude, we have a sort of role, the people here and the wider community in zero knowledge proof. When you come here, you can be you don't have to be already taking upon yourself this role, right? You can be curious about what zero knowledge is and how it can be useful for me. It's not you don't have to go out and sing the praises of zero knowledge, but you should know that there's people counting on the active people in our community, counting on them to look really in detail and make this offering robust, make sure that we're not missing anything, because if we're going to adopt that for crucial systems, we have to have this type of trust. So thanks everybody, and have a great ZKProof community event. Thank you.